So, thank you very much. It's lovely to be here. As Sandy said, I started BBC Watch in 2012, but I'll talk a little bit about CAMERA first. CAMERA, the Committee for Accuracy in English Reporting in America, was founded in 1982. CAMERA believes that public opinion ultimately shapes political policy and government policy. And so public opinion is important. It's important for the public to be informed and correctly informed, and to be able to demand of our politicians policies which relate to truth and relate to an accurate situation, reading of the situation. We try to educate the public, and we try to demand from journalists accurate and impartial reporting. Today, CAMERA is in the middle. Up on the left, you can see CAMERA on campus. We work in a lot of campuses in the United States, helping pro-Israel students work against anti-Israel bias on campus. We've started working in the UK about 3 years ago. It's quite small at the moment, but we're growing all the time. We have a department called Revista, which does the Spanish language media in South America and in Spain. We have up on the top right a new department which just started, CAMERA Arabic. We don't monitor Arab media, we monitor Arab language media produced by Western media organisations such as the BBC, Sky, CNN, which is often awful, absolutely abysmal. It's what the BBC produces in Arabic language is worse than what it produces in the English language, if you can believe that. We have bottom right a department called Perspectiva, which does the Hebrew media, and then on the bottom left there is BBC Watch, which is me, and UK Media Watch, which is my colleague Adam, who does the rest of the British media, the print media, and tries to do Channel 4 and Sky, and as much as we can. We're entirely run by public donations, and that is what we do at the moment. Why the BBC? Because it's the biggest media organisation in the world, the most influential media organisation in the world. In 2017, it reached 372 million people around the world every week. Their target, they have their centenary year coming up in 2022 with the BBC. Their target is 500 million people by 2022. Consistently, in polls, they are considered the most trusted media organisation in the world. 90% of people in the UK, in Europe, in the US think the BBC is the most trusted media organisation. So when the BBC gets it wrong, a lot of other people get it wrong as well, and that's why the BBC is so important. How did we start? It's a bit of a funny story. In 2009, Operation Castlehead, I'm sure you all remember, and I happened to be here in the UK. And I hadn't lived in the UK for 30 odd years, and to be honest, I was just shocked by the abysmal coverage in the British media of what was going on in Gaza. And I rang up the Foreign Office in Jerusalem. I said to them, look guys, I'm in England, the coverage is awful, I speak Hebrew, I speak English, what do you want me to do? And they said, get back on the talk, get on the talkbacks on the newspapers, tell the truth about Israel. So I went to The Guardian, which had a thing they still do called Comment is Free. And the talkbacks there were just absolutely abysmal and downright anti-Semitic a lot of the time. And so I just started writing talkbacks. And one day I saw something there, somebody was making horrible comments about a political blog called Harry's Place. I don't know if you've heard of it, but well worth a look. I thought, well, if this lot say it's bad, then it was probably very good. And so I went there, and it was. A left-wing British political blog. And I started writing comments there, and then they asked me to write things about Israel, and from then it just rolled on. And we joined up, I joined up with a group of people who were very concerned about The Guardian's coverage, and we formed a blog called CIF Watch, Comment is Free Watch. And basically it was us in our pyjamas in our bedrooms just writing things. And so it continued, and then 2010, there was the Flotilla and Mavi Marmara event, and that was a big turning point for us because we realised that we had to up our game, and we had to get serious, and we had to find some funding. One of our guys nearly got fired from work because rather than doing his work, he was busy writing our blog and, in New York. So we eventually found Camera, and that was how the link was made between, you can see at the bottom of UK Media Watch, it says formerly CIF Watch. We changed the name after we joined Camera and started taking on more British media. So that's how we came to do what we do. I'm actually a nurse. This completely overtook my life by chance, this media business. So framing, how Stephen talked about framing, and he talked about it very well. Maybe you've seen this picture from the recent Hurricane Florence in the United States. The reporter at the front is framing the story. He's battling the wind, this awful story of a terrible storm. And then, as he was doing this live on television, two guys just walked very nonchalantly behind him and ruined his framing of the story. So this happens terribly, terribly often. What you see, what you're told, is not always the whole story. The BBC, you might think that the biggest media organisation in the free world would tell stories about places which don't have free media, where the state controls the media, where the truth can't always get out. This is a study I did between 2012 and 2014. This relates to 2014. On the far left, you can see BBC coverage of Israel on the website, and this is, on the right, you can see the other countries which got coverage. Freedom House defines countries as free, partly free, or not free. In the Middle East, there's one free country, it's Israel. All the rest are either not free or partly free, and most of them are not free at all. So you would have thought that places like Sudan, maybe, would have benefited from BBC coverage. People would learn what was happening in these places via the BBC. In 2014, the highest amount of coverage was given to Syria, and it was nearly all, if not all, to do with the civil war there. There was no news about Syria itself, what was going on inside Syria apart from the civil war. The second most covered country was Iraq, partly free, and that was because ISIS was just rising up there in 2014. And the third most frequently covered country was Israel, the only one defined as free. Egypt, which in that year was demoted by Freedom House from partly free to not free, came fourth after Israel. And Iran came fifth, and nearly all the coverage again was to do with the P5+1 JCPOA talks about the nuclear deal, not about what's actually happening in Iran, not about women's rights in Iran, not about press freedom in Iran. If you look at the Freedom House has a worst of the worst, the 10 worst countries in the world, and 3 of them come under the BBC's definition of the Middle East: Sudan, Syria, and Saudi Arabia. Israel received 200 times more coverage than Sudan in 2014, and 4 times more coverage than Saudi Arabia. Why? One reason is because, people often ask me, is the BBC anti-Semitic? I honestly don't think that that's the right definition. There are so many factors why this is the case, and one of them, some of them quite banal. One of them is that the BBC has its main office in the Middle East in Jerusalem, which is very convenient. They can go to the bar in the evening, which you can't in a lot of places in the Middle East, which is one good reason for having your office in Jerusalem rather than in Riyadh, for instance. There is no actual threat to journalists. They can say whatever they want. They very often recycle local media reports, and I'll talk about that more in a moment, because there is a big English language media scene in Israel, an Israeli English language, Jerusalem Post, Haaretz in English, and very often you see reports that are simply recycled from the local media. I can tell you that in the last 6 years, the BBC has put out 3 reports on stray cats in Jerusalem. when there's an uptick in the conflict, we get what I call parachuted reporters. People who don't report on the BBC on a day-to-day basis, and very often have no idea about the Middle East, but it's a big story, and so they get parachuted in. And some of the worst coverage comes from these type of reporters. I don't know if any of you read a book by an American journalist called Stephanie Gutman. She wrote a book called The Other War, Israelis, Palestinians, and the Struggle for Media Supremacy, which is about the Second Intifada. And she has a wonderful story there where she's in somewhere in Judean Samaria, and there's a roadblock, and she happens to be there, and all of a sudden this Australian TV crew land, and they all jump out of the van, and they set up their equipment, and there's actually nothing going on at this junction at all. And the reporter stands there in front of the camera and says, I'm here in the West Bank reporting on the worst day of violence since this trouble started. And the cameraman turns the camera off and says, there's nothing happening here. He says, I haven't come all the way from Australia to report that there's nothing happening here. And that's a very important element in the coverage that we see. Operation Protected Edge 2014. In the 51 days that it went on, 416 separate items of content appeared on the BBC News website. It's an average of about 8 items a day. People saw 3 times more filmed reports from Gaza itself, what was happening in Gaza, than they did what was happening in Israel. That affects the way people view the content, the conflict. There was a very interesting discussion with Lisa Doucette shortly after that on Twitter. When the Yemen war began, one of my readers asked her on Twitter, why aren't you covering what's happening in Yemen like you did in Gaza? She said, we don't have the same access that we had in Gaza. Again, these are often practical, small things which affect coverage. October 2015, we had this upsurge in terror attacks. The red columns are the actual amount of terror attacks per month. The blue are how many the BBC reported. You can see there's a very big discrepancy. They actually reported in between October 1st, 2015 and September 30th, 2016, a year, there were 2,261 terror attacks recorded by the Shin Bet, the Israel Security Agency. 4.5% only were reported by the BBC. Clearly that skews the way people see the conflict. 39 people, Israelis and foreign nationals, were killed during those 12 months, hundreds wounded. 3 of the fatalities weren't reported at all by the BBC, and 30.8% were not identified by name. They weren't even named by the BBC. You don't see that when there's a terror attack in Paris or in London. People get the names and very often the life stories of the people, of the victims of the terror attack. The trend continues. During the whole of 2017, the BBC News website reported 0.92% of the actual terror attacks that took place in Israel. Of 21 separate incidents of rocket and mortar fire from the Gaza Strip and Sinai in 2017, only 3 incidents received coverage on the BBC News website. In 2017, the website reported 89% of fatalities in terror attacks in Israel, only 2 were ignored completely. That matters because when Israel has to react, when we have to go into Gaza, as was the case in 2014, or when we have to put up roadblocks or put up the anti-terrorist fence, people don't understand why we're doing it, because they haven't been given the entire picture. This is a study I did in 2016 and 2017. I took all the BBC News website reports, and why do I focus a lot on the website? Because that's the BBC content that remains in the public domain forever. Something they said on 10 o'clock news a week ago, nobody will remember, but the website is permanent public record. And so what the website says is important. So in 2017, you can see different categories of reports. So you've got reports about security, about terror attacks, about Syria, Israeli attacks in Syria, and so on and so forth. But the really interesting thing is the Palestinian affairs and the Israeli affairs. And as you can see, there's a lot less coverage of Palestinian affairs than there is of Israeli affairs. So that's very, very typical of BBC coverage. You will hear a lot about internal Israeli politics. You will hear a lot about court cases in Israel on the BBC news website. You will not hear about Palestinian internal politics. You will not hear about women's rights in the Palestinian territories, about gay rights, about demonstrations against PA corruption, about harassment of journalists. The BBC does not cover those stories. Paramilitary summer camps for children in Gaza doesn't cover stories like that. And again, it's the framing of the story because people aren't seeing a lot of the story. Another very interesting phenomenon is the whole issue of the Palestinian Authority's payment to terrorists. You know, they get a monthly stipend from the Palestinian Authority if they've been convicted of, even before they've actually been convicted, they've done a terror attack against Israelis. The BBC avoids that topic completely. This is, I mentioned before that very often they just recycle stories from the Israeli press. This is a story, this is the end of the story. In February 2013, the BBC's Yolande Nell, who's been a Jerusalem reporter since around 2012, did a story on the BBC News website that Ethiopian women had been forced to take a form of birth control called Depo-Provera, which is an injection which gives birth control for 3 months. And then they've been forced by the Israeli authorities to use this sort of birth control. That was taken from a report that appeared in Haaretz in English on the same day. And that report was actually based on a TV report, an Israeli TV report. In March 2013, Canada got a correction from Haaretz because the story was basically made up. There had been women who had come from Ethiopia who had been given that sort of birth control because they'd been waiting in transit camps in Addis Ababa, and you can't fly when you're very pregnant. And so they had been advised to use birth control so that they wouldn't miss this slot where they finally managed to get a plane and get out of Addis Ababa. It turns out that that sort of birth control is very popular in Africa. It's used a lot. And it turns out that one of the reasons women in Africa use it is because it doesn't depend on their husband's agreement. It makes them more independent. And so some women continued using it because that's what they knew when they came to Israel as well. The BBC, even though we got a correction, the BBC didn't correct its own article, which it had taken from the Haaretz article that we got corrected. In January 2016, because of these accusations, Israel did a proper official investigation into the story, and the state ombudsman found no evidence at all of Ethiopian women having been given contraception against their will. In May 2016, BBC Radio 4, a very serious program, The Briefing Room, David Aronovich. There's a lady called Kerry-Ann Mendoza, I don't know if you've heard of her, she runs The Canary. She was on that program, and this is what she said. And this is the way this story that was reported by the BBC has taken on a life of its own, and it's now become a story not about contraception, but about sterilisation. It's become a story with a Nazi analogy in it. Yeah. And this is what happens when bad reporting is not correct. Themes, settlements. I'll be up front, I'm a nasty settler from the Golan Heights. So, one of the BBC's favourite themes is settlement as an obstacle to peace. There is no peace in the Middle East because Mrs. Sela from the Golan Heights or Mrs. Cohen from Judea and Samaria built an extension on their house. Wow. You can agree on this settlement, but that's not why there isn't any peace in the Middle East, believe me. The removal of settlements. We evacuated everybody from Sinai. We We evacuated everybody from Gaza, and I don't know if people in this country are aware of the great rift that the evacuation of all settlements from Gaza made in Israeli society. It was a very, very traumatic incident for us, but we did it, and we did it well, and we did it respectfully. And then with a whole rocket shot at us for removing settlements. We are a lot more careful these days about this idea of land for peace, because we've tried it and it hasn't worked. The BBC will not tell you that Israel, if it comes up, then they will have to do, but they will not tell you as a matter of course that Israel has already removed settlements and what happened as a result of that. I have to say that since 2017 they've got a new favourite theme, which is Trump and East Jerusalem. It's a bit overtaken the settlements theme a little bit, and there is this sort of equation, quite blatantly sometimes. It's a bit embarrassing in a way. Trump is horrible. Trump supports Israel. Therefore, Israel is horrible. And this is this equation that we're seeing more and more in BBC reporting. When they report a lot of on settlement tenders, on building tenders, that's very interesting too, because they'll often report the same tender 3, 4, 5 times. Because very often planning permission doesn't just go through the first time. It can come up to a committee meeting 2 or 3 times, or a tender can fail and somebody else gets it. And you can see numbers recycled again and again and again and again, and it makes them look enormous. It makes them look enormous. Another trend we see an awful lot is BBC reliance on political NGOs. And you can see the red arrow at the bottom. This is a map on the BBC News website. It's taken from B'Tselem. Not even their own map. They've just taken a map from B'Tselem. You can see where the red arrow is. Mount Scopus is described as, you can see the bottom of the key, an Israeli settlement. Mount Scopus has been Israeli since 1914. The Jews bought the land. It's not an Israeli settlement. It's the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. And it's marked on the BBC's map as an Israeli settlement. If you look a little bit further down, you can see the old city is also marked. The Jewish quarter of the old city is marked as an Israeli settlement. That map doesn't exist anymore because I got them to change it. But what is very interesting is when I was researching the background to this map, I looked on B'Tselem's website, and they didn't mark Mount Scopus as an Israeli settlement. The BBC's added that on to a map that they accredit to B'Tselem. Another issue which is not presented very well is international law. You can hold whatever views you like about settlements and the conflict, but people need to have the information. This is the latest, the Great Return March in Gaza. This is just one example, but it's a classic example of BBC framing of the story of what's going on the Gaza border at the moment. So, David and Goliath, you can't get more blatant than that. The people who are rioting on the border are described as protesters. The actual actions are described as protests. They talk here about burning tyres, balloons. They don't talk about grenades, they don't talk about shooting attacks, they don't talk about IED attacks, all of which have taken place. They're eliminated from the picture entirely. Note too the emphasis on children. That is a very, very big part of the story in BBC framing. And one bit of unfinished business I have with them at the moment is on the 14th of May, there was a very big riot on the border. I'm sure you remember, there were a lot of people who died, who were killed. And one of them was a baby, a 9-month-old baby, I think, called Leila Khandour. The BBC reported her death on literally dozens of programmes, including BBC Breakfast, you see the top, on the website. 10 days later, May 25th, Hamas removed her from the casualty list. Turned out she had some sort of genetic illness, and she probably, according to what we know, had died of her existing condition, and not because the Israelis had fired tear gas near the border. On May 28th, a Palestinian who had been arrested trying to infiltrate Israel, who was actually related to her, told interrogators, Israeli interrogators, that Hamas had paid her parents to tell the foreign media that she'd died because of Israeli tear gas. I have a complaint that's pending about that. I've taken it to the Executive Complaints Unit. It's with them at the moment. They haven't replied to me yet, but we'll see what happens. This isn't the first Israelis are baby killers story we've seen on the BBC. I don't know if you remember, but in 2012, the son of a BBC reporter in Gaza died, was killed, when something fell on their house. The BBC had absolutely no doubt what had happened. The Israelis had killed this little boy who was called Omar Mashalal. And you can see tweets, real-time tweets from BBC reporters. Paul Adams, who was actually in the States, reporting in the States, but he's got the story, he knows what the story is. This is Paul Donoghue, he was head of the Jerusalem Bureau at the time. And there was no doubt, the BBC pushed this story tremendously. Several months later, March, I think, that was in November 2012, yeah, March, the UN came out with a report, and it turned out that it was a Hamas rocket that had fallen on their house. It had nothing to do with Israel at all. Has the BBC corrected? Have the people been given the same, has it been given the same amount of media profile that the original? Of course not, of course not. And so a lot of people still think that Israel killed this little boy. So much so, I'm sorry, the top picture's gone. You can see the picture at the bottom, and the one very similar that was supposed to be at the top. You got the same image used to paint Israel as baby killers. That's a demonstration in London in 2013. This is The Guardian using the same picture, 2 years after it's been proven to be wrong, because the story sticks. Another one, if you look on the BBC News website and look for an article called Disputed Deadly Incidents from 2014, Operation Protective Edge, you will still find a story telling you that Israel killed a whole load of children in Shata refugee camp, which we didn't. Again, it was misfired rockets. Language when reporting terrorism. This is one of my big beefs, I'm afraid. The BBC editorial guidelines instruct BBC reporters, BBC journalists, not to use the word terrorism because they say it shows a value judgment. I think that's just stupid PC rubbish, but that's beside the point. That's what their editorial guidelines say. But they do use the word terrorism. In Barcelona, in Nice, in London, in Stockholm, in Berlin, they're very capable of reporting on terrorism. In Israel, no. They never use the word terrorism. You can see some examples of headlines at the top. The bit at the bottom is a response that BBC Complaints gave one of my helpers when he asked why they hadn't reported a terror attack in Israel using the word terrorism, and just several days before they'd reported a terror attack in London using the word terrorism. So you can see, first of all, the BBC considers that there are those who might consider the actions of the Israeli government as terrorist actions. Good to know. And then they have this excuse that the direct combat, indirect combat. To be quite honest, it's a load of rubbish, because a terror attack in Britain is fighting against ISIS in Iraq. France is fighting against ISIS in Iraq. There's enormous international coalition, so you shouldn't be able to make a difference according to the BBC's criteria. And another interesting thing is that, I don't know if you remember, there was an attack, it's still going through the courts, in a place called Douma in July 2015. A family their house was set alight, presumably by Jewish terrorists. The trial is still ongoing, as I say. BBC did report that as terrorism. So I mentioned before the issue of payments to terrorists. This is from Jeremy Boyne, who won the top. The Palestinians have compared, Jeremy Boyne, the Palestinians speaking through Jeremy Boyne's mouth, yeah, has compared payments to the salaries Israel pays its soldiers. Another interesting issue is the whole issue of incitement on social media. There's a lot of trouble with Palestinian incitement on social media. The middle frame here is BBC World Service Radio. Again, it's a good example. It's narrative. It's very easy to paint the picture as two conflicting narratives, and then you don't have to actually tell people what the truth is or what happened. And the bottom example is the portrayal of terrorists as political prisoners, which you also see an awful, awful lot on the BBC. I find it very worrying at least, is that the BBC's willingness or the alacrity with which the BBC adopts PLO media directives. And one example, in November, 5th of November 2014, the PLO put out a directive to foreign journalists saying that they should really use the phrase El-Aqsa Mosque compound instead of Temple Mount or Haram al-Sharif. The BBC's style guide says that you should use Temple Mount, Haram al-Sharif. And immediately I began to see people were abandoning the BBC style guide and using the term El-Aqsa Mosque compound, using the PLO's media guideline. I wrote a big study on this, and I'm very happy to say that it sort of disappeared, that phenomenon. The big question, of course, is what can we do? So, BBC Watch is BBC Watch. We work very hard. We work, first of all, to give the general public the information that they need on a story. So when I address a story the BBC's addressed, I'm trying very, very hard to give people the background information that the BBC hasn't told them. And to thereby empower people and enable them to make their own complaints to the BBC if they wish to do so. We make complaints as well. I have a rather weird relationship with the BBC, I'm afraid to say. They won't meet with me, they won't talk with me. I organised an event in Parliament 3 years ago, they wouldn't come, they refused to send a delegate or a representative. I've tried to meet them in the Jerusalem office, they won't meet me. But just yesterday or the day before, I got an email asking me from the BBC to contribute to a new public consultancy that they're doing on the subject of their editorial guidelines. So if you want to contribute, get on the BBC website, find their new consultation, and you can make your own contribution to that consultation and tell them what you think about their editorial guidelines. The complaint system is abysmal. I'm sure everybody here knows how frustrating, and you lose the will to live after stage 2B or whatever. I suppose a lot of people here know that the first 2 stages of the BBC complaints system aren't even run by the BBC. They're outsourced to a private company called Capital PLC, which is the same company that collects the TV license. So the first 2 complaints you make, you're not even talking to the BBC. You're talking to somebody who's getting minimum wage in a call centre in Capital PLC's offices, basically. So you do stage 1A, and then they say that's a load of rubbish, you're not right. So you do stage 1B, and they say again that's a load of rubbish, that's not right. And then you get to the ECU, the Executive Complaint Unit, which is actually the first time you're talking to somebody from the BBC or writing to somebody from the BBC. Sometimes you get results, sometimes you don't. The stats are abysmal. They actually uphold about 0.92% of complaints made. The public is in some cases to blame for that as well. Because I get a lot of missent mail from people who think I'm in the BBC, and I'm not, because I'm called BBC Watch. And I get complaints, and you think, well, no, to be honest, if I was the BBC, I wouldn't take this very seriously either, because I don't like the presenter's accent, or I don't like your Wimbledon coverage. You can't say something broad like that. You can't say, I don't like your Israel coverage. You have to come with a specific point, and you have to link it to their editorial guidelines. You have to hoist them with their own petard and say, look, on the 20th of October you did a report and you said X and the truth is Y, and you are committed to accuracy under BBC editorial guidelines. And you have to give proof, you have to give sources. I realise it's not for everybody, it's absolutely soul destroying. Ofcom, as I'm sure you know, came into the picture in 2016. To be honest, I went to meet them. In 2015, when the BBC Charter was being renewed and it was clear that Ofcom were going to be in the picture, I sent them a bit of a cheeky email and said, would you like to talk about the BBC? And they sent me a polite email back, brushing me off. So I thought, well, okay, that was worth a try. And then a few months later, I got an email saying, would you like a meeting? So I flew to London and I spoke to Ofcom and I explained to them the whole problematic issue with the BBC complaints process. And I'm sorry to say that although I was very optimistic when I came out of that meeting, very little has happened indeed, and I'm rather disappointed with them. So what can we do? Apart from that, I mean, I'm not saying don't complain, do complain, but make your complaint effective. Who here is on Twitter? Twitter is wonderful. You get right to the BBC journalists. You do it instantly. You do it publicly. And you get a lot better results on Twitter than you do spending 6 months of your life going through the BBC complaint. Really, really. So I'll give you an example. Sorry, no, I won't. No, I'm going backwards. Why am I going backwards? Oh, because I'm holding upside down. Okay, this is October 2015. On the left-hand side, you have the original BBC headline. Palestinians shot dead after Jerusalem attack kills 2. It was a Saturday evening. I was on Twitter. I just happened to be online. So I sent a tweet saying, Jerusalem didn't attack anybody. What's a Jerusalem attack? What's a Jerusalem attack? What's a lot of ruin? Get your story, get your headline right. So they changed it. Jerusalem attack, inverted commas, Israelis killed in old city by Palestinian. It was known by that time that the guy who carried out the terrorist attack was a Palestinian. So I tweeted them again, not just make a whole lot of people pile in. So on the left you have the third headline. This is all in the space of an hour. Jerusalem attack, Israelis killed in old city by Palestine. Okay, and then we changed it again. Jerusalem, Palestinian kills 2 Israelis in old city. What was so hard about that? What was so hard about it? You can tell what happened. You can tell the sequence of the story. You can tell what happened. But again, this was a result of people on Twitter hassling them for an hour. But it works. It works. And if you're not on Twitter and you think it's a bit scary, it's not. Really, it's not. It's not difficult. And it's a very, very effective tool. I use it an awful lot. I use the complaint system. I write emails to programs and to producers, but I also use Twitter an awful lot, and it is an incredibly, incredibly effective tool. Thank you.